So ever since Mark Zuckerberg coined the phrase to move fast and break things, this has been the motto of businesses nearly everywhere. Companies wanting to be the next unicorn have sacrificed everything for sheer pace. The race is on. That motto of harder, better, faster, stronger, to sacrifice everything echoed its way in from external funding and VC partners right down to the engineering decisions made on the day-to-day. This lesson has been painfully learned from founders again and again. Timing was everything for Starsky Robotics. By the way, I know I've got the post-lunch slot here, so I just wanted to say hi, and I hope you've had a good day so far. I'm seeing some nods and some thumbs up. Thank you so much. Cheers. Being in person is scary again. I don't know whether or not anyone else has any residual nerves here, but please be kind. Or don't, you know, I'm not the boss of you. But anyway, here, so I'm talking about the founder here, Stefan Seltz-Achmacher of Starsky Robotics. He felt like timing was everything. They needed to be the first, and early existence was their edge. By not being able to win the race of being first to market, their CEO felt like they sacrificed everything. Their success was underscored by the hype cycle that they were unable to keep up with. And here's, I think, the CEO and prominent speaker, Jeff Lerner, echoes this sentiment. He really echoes the indictment of speed, adding that in a world where everything is moving so fast, if you're using relentless acceleration to secure your first place, you've got no choice but to keep up that pace. Even on a purely operational level, the Dora report, which came out yesterday, yay for up-to-date stats, it echoes everything. So so-called companies ship more, so-called elite companies rather, they ship more than 6,500 times faster than low-performing teams. That's not an error. That is ridiculous. When I was first drafting this slide, it was less than half that when I was using the 2018 metrics. And they also have close to 1,000 more frequent code deployments. So you glance at these figures, it seems that they're seemingly built by 10x's, running at an impossible rate. In the past, I've worked for a team that was constantly shifting gears. Priorities changed on the hour, and when we were asking for a sense of overarching strategy, I was told that we were just throwing things at the wall to see what stuck. I don't know if anyone else has been in a similar position. I'm seeing some nods, which is great, but also horrible. So this is a point in the talk where I actually put awkward pause down in my notes because I feel like this point actually deserves one. An absence of strategy isn't a substitute for strategy itself. Fans of XKCD will know this comic pretty well, but one of my favorite lines in the new Marvel movie Shang-Chi is, no spoilers I promise, is during a training scene, one character says to another, if you aim at nothing, you hit nothing. Speed without direction is simply running without actually guaranteeing that you'll get anywhere. The philosophy of moving fast and breaking things doesn't work in the long term, and it can't be applied to all things, all processes, and certainly not all people. Speed hasn't just become commonplace within companies and organizations. For better or for worse, we have hacked our brains, our dopamine release schedules, and we've monetized the concept of an attention span. So these stats here come out from a 2019 report that track what happens within the first 5 seconds on a web page or a web app. These first 5 seconds, rather, I don't know whether I could get any more Fs in that sentence, have the highest impact on impression conversion and engagement. And each additional second within that 5-second rate, your conversion drops by 4%. I think everyone knows here that's had to work on an SRE team that most conversion happens within the first 2 seconds. But quite frankly, milliseconds matter. And as customers push companies, companies push employees, and we try to push each other to stay competitive. When we ask for a new feature, getting it delivered is simply a matter of ASAP. So as consumers, we want more, companies want more, and we end up being, SRE teams and DevOps teams end up being crunched. Last year, Deloitte conducted some research into what happens in the first 10 seconds when a customer visits a web app. And the results are astounding, but what is really interesting to note about this study is that these results are across all verticals. I think no one's new to the idea that you're no longer competing with those within your category. You're now competing against every digital experience that consumer has had in recent history. For anyone with any front-end hobbies will like the first couple points here around rendering times and what becomes a perceivable error to a user. But so these differences can have a genuine impact to a company's bottom line, with a 0.1 second improvement on load times increasing turnover rate by 0.5%. I'll send out these stats afterwards. I think it's a little bit not super clear. But moving fast would be all well and good if it didn't have massive drawbacks. These drawbacks start at the human level, but then they bleed through to engineering. This year's Developer Happiness Index showcased some really cool findings, but within this report, I found this quote from a dev particularly interesting. A major pain point I've experienced in multiple workplaces is the obsessive pursuit of a deluded understanding of an MVP. There is so much emphasis on making the building facade look impressive and moving fast, but no acknowledgement of the burning trash fire in the backyard. It is no accident as to why the tiny dumpster fire cartoon has become synonymous with 2020. In these cases, moving fast comes at the expense of actually listening to what's going on. Feedback becomes a didactic process, and we don't actually learn from our mistakes. Incidents go ignored and covered up instead of becoming points of improvement. Now, back in June, did anyone receive this email? No? Well, it went out to 44 million people. So this was a rather embarrassing but very public example of what happens when your production environment goes awry and one of your integration tests goes live to not a test email address. Yeah, it's achingly public, but a forensic investigation would probably undoubtedly find that this has happened for multiple companies that are exhibiting today. This is not an isolated thing, and presenting that incidents don't happen doesn't make them simply go away. So what are the consequences to moving fast, aside from painfully embarrassing mistakes that go out to millions of people? Without a sense of sustainability, you suffer from a high mean time to resolve incidents. You end up releasing features before they're actually ready. And quite frankly, are things like burnout and high employee turnover actually worth it? The thing with impressions is they stick, and you'll lose consumer confidence really quickly. Now let's go back to the DORA report here, and let's have a closer look at the stats that I first off highlighted. So these companies that move faster actually have significantly lower change rates. Even though this change rate used to be a lot, it's gone down to about, 3x, which is pretty impressive. But this stat here is not an error. So the companies with the faster lead time from commit to deploy actually recover at the same sort of rate. So yes, they're moving quickly, but they're also failing, and they're learning from their failures as they move. If we take another look at the HBO incident, yes, it was a terrifyingly embarrassing incident for that engineer, but within around an hour, the term hug-up started trending, and loads of people were reaching out with records of their own failures and their own incidents that mirrored this. I think on some level, everyone could kind of relate. I don't know if anyone here has ever broken prod. Yes? Yeah. Okay. So some people have broken prod. Okay, so it's not this happens. That's very reassuring, not just for me, but also for that HBO engineer. So let's reframe failure in a positive way, and if I can speak, that would be really useful right now. Let's reframe failure in a positive way. So I'd like you to message me on Twitter if you can with the last time that you failed. What was the last screw up that you made, and how did you learn from it? It doesn't have to be an epic failure. Small failures are okay. Small slip-ups are perfectly acceptable, but it's just all about how we recover and reframing that as part of the process and part of the discovery pattern. So I'll go first in true TikTok meme fashion. As a new dev, I pushed Secret to a public repo. And it triggered a lot of alerts in a very public way, which was great because it's exactly what is meant to happen. It stopped the secret got invalidated. We kind of generated a new key. These things happen, but the failure actually comes from when you repeat the mistake twice. When we rescope failure in the context of, say, a sine wave, it all becomes part of the knowledge acquisition process. Looking at things in this manner helps us to accept that we need to fail in order to move towards our achievement. It also takes into account the fact that we need to change our strategy as we go. So in order to get to a point where we're failing from failure to succeeding, we need to be able to change on the fly and make decisions based on the information that we receive at the time. A common failure that we experience as technologists is incidents. I don't know whether or not anyone else gets a knot in their stomach whenever they hear the term incident. And I'm very hating myself for doing air quotes in public right now. It's very apparent that I've been in a room for 18 months, isn't it? Incidents happen. But we've come to see incidents as failures, as a negative thing. If anyone's spent a stint working in InfoSec, you know just how many DDoS attacks actually happen compared to how many get talked about. Instead of framing them as incidents, maybe we should take a page out of Netflix's book and frame them as surprises. Look at them as chaos events that we can learn from. In the book Team Human, Doug Rushkoff says that teams should be based on common hopes, needs, strengths, and vulnerabilities. And we don't get that by enforcing shame, but by embracing openness. So there are multiple elements that are necessary to create a culture that avoids shame and embraces openness and encourages learning and experimentation. After all, you can't really have growth without actually trialing an experiment. So the first element you need is a blameless culture, and a blameless culture focuses on systems where systems and processes fail. Instead of looking for a person to blame, there's an honest and open session examining how things can be improved. If you look to attribute incidents to human error, you're assigning blame. You're assigning shame, and that's not what we're looking for. A blameless culture needs to hinge on psychological safety. And psychological safety is gives employees the ability to show up without fear of consequences. It means that you feel included, that you can learn, that you can contribute, but employees ultimately need to be, I know when you say like lack of consequences, of course everything needs a consequence, but the thing that we're trying to get to here is that people aren't too afraid to speak up when things inevitably go wrong. Because if you don't give people the opportunity to say what's wrong with the process, what's failing, why it's falling down, then you'll never actually learn from the mistake, and people will take that knowledge with them and they will leave. Building this requires empathy, openness, teamwork, dare I say it. Don't think it's possible to say that word anymore without conjuring up the idea of coloured blocks on a table and post-its and markers, but nevertheless it's necessary. But one way to create an environment of psychological safety is to change your relationship with why in your vocabulary in your teams. Now, of course, you need to understand why things happen, but the natural response that we get to why is we're sometimes on the defensive. Try to substitute in for how and what questions. It helps people to feel included in the discovery and joining in on the discovery process. It's a really small tweak, but sometimes leaning on how or what can solicit a better response from people. Now, I'm not here to advocate for being slower. We need to move faster, of course, but I don't really think we need to break things. I want us to think about moving faster in a safer way. If you look back at the Dora report, which, as you can tell now, I am obsessed with since it came out, One of the findings was that teams that are more autonomous and they get to choose their own tooling actually do a lot better. Teams that focus on SRE practices actually perform at 51 times higher at their sustainable progress is 51 times higher than the low-performing teams. I'll follow up with the report so you can peruse it at your leisure. But of course, security protocols need to be adhered to, but by and large, let your teams pick their own tools. They know how to use them and they'll feel empowered. Some of the processes you can, of course, use to build a better, faster process is the ability to be able to deploy features without releasing them to everyone. So you can do this with progressive delivery. You can test in production, putting your changes behind a feature flag so that you can switch those off when necessary. You can perform targeted rollouts and a canary launch, so you can release to a small group of users and just gradually roll that out when you feel that your evidence is being valid, when you've got the evidence behind your hypotheses. And in terms of operations, things are going to break, so that's why you need safety valves, you need your kill switches, you need to be able to divert when the worst inevitably happens. Look at service metrics and measure how features are performing against your key business metrics. Yeah, I'm a little bit obsessed with kill switches, I'm not going to lie. But lastly, let's talk about experimentation. So everyone knows experiments. It's where you prove hypotheses or you test against your hypotheses. Experiments are learning opportunities and they give you the ability to fail in a measured manner. So what can experimentation in software teach us? Well, it teaches us how to gather the feedback. One experiment that we ran over at Launch Darkly was around pagination. So we had some businesses that were running with feature flags and they were running with them at huge volumes. We needed to be able to test whether or not pagination was going to harm adoption of our new customers. So we rolled that out to a small test group, gathered our feedback, and kept going. We wanted to determine whether or not people with not a huge number of flags would experience the same sort of difficulties as those that we were mitigating for with huge volumes. And thankfully, our experiment showed that there was no negative impact for people. There was actually a positive impact on those that had a large number of flags. So, yeah, this is a very flag-driven example, but it goes to say that you need to test against your hypotheses. And the final piece of the puzzle, and to me the most important one, is people. So you need to have people that are willing to communicate, have empathy, and understand the tools and processes being put in place. And you need to be able to empower your developers. Who feels empowered at their workplace? Middling? Okay, that's pretty good. It has a real noticeable day-to-day impact on not just on the decisions that you make, but how long you can stick with your choices. So, fostering a culture of inclusion and openness, it can genuinely create better products. So only when you're running safely at speed will you actually be able to make meaningful progress. Only you can prevent dumpster fires. So thanks very much for listening to me speak about speed and safety and trashing Facebook. I managed to leave out the pictures of Mark Zuckerberg in my presentation, but I didn't manage to not talk about it, so it's going to be in the recording anyway. Thank you so much for having me, everyone, and I hope you're having a good day. See you later.